just start at the beginning and tell you my story. When people find out I'm an astronaut, probably the first question they say is, when you were 6 years old, did you know that you wanted to become an astronaut? Did you dream of being an astronaut? Was that your lifelong goal? And really, in my case, it was not. When I was 6 years old, astronauts were sort of an unreachable aspiration. Everybody played astronaut. Everybody wanted to be an astronaut, but really nobody, I would say, had a sense that it was anything achievable. Well, I have 3 missions in my career. I wear 3 patches on my flight suit for 3 missions, although it's just 2 flights into space. And I'll explain that in a second. My first flight was the picture you just saw in 2001, a 2-week mission to the International Space Station. A great introduction to space. I got to do a spacewalk, and it was just fantastic. And then when I got back, my boss asked me if I wanted to live on the space station, go train and live on the space station. And of course, there's only one answer to that. And so I spent the next 5 years training to go live on the space station. My trip up to the space station was on another space shuttle called STS-120. And so I became a crew member of that space shuttle crew. And we trained together for a year. And they took me up to the space station. So I consider myself a part of that crew. But then when we got to the space station, I transferred over to the space station and became a member of the space station crew. And I'm a member of Expedition 16, the 16th crew to ever live on the space station. So a total of something like 132 days in space. I flew on the space shuttle. In only 8.5 minutes, you go from sitting on a launch pad in Florida, going 0 miles an hour, to circling the Earth every 90 minutes, going 17,500 miles an hour. It's a pretty exciting ride. In my career time, we've been going here and building this, the International Space Station. It's just an amazing laboratory, traveling about 400 kilometers or 250 miles above the surface of the Earth. Okay, when you get to the space station, you have to learn an entirely new skill, and that skill is how to get from one end of the space station to the other. This is a trip from one end of the space station to the other, and here that black thing is a garbage can, because we need a rubber lid on our garbage can, because since everything floats, we don't want the garbage to float out of the garbage can. You can, if the movie's running for you, there are computers everywhere. Our main interface to the whole space station system is through laptop computers. This is a storage unit called the FGB, and as I noted, there's no floor and there's no ceiling on the space station, so wherever your head is can be the ceiling, and wherever your feet are can be the floor. We're going through these hatches. You can close the hatches in an emergency to isolate a leak. And now we're in what's called the US segment. There's a spacesuit getting ready for a spacewalk, and some emergency oxygen that we just passed there. And this is the US laboratory module with my boss, Peggy Whitson, riding the exercise bike. Bike's pretty cool. There's a window underneath the bike, and so you can look out the window as you're pedaling, and if you can bike for 90 minutes, you can go all the way around the Earth. Shuttle mission that brought me up, STS-120, brought up this module that you can see on the right side. That's called the Harmony module. It's called a node, and it's a big can, and we use the robot arm to connect it to the rest of the space station, and there are motorized bolts that bolt the whole thing together. But like adding an addition to your house, it's not just the structure that makes it a functional unit or module. You have to hook up the electrics and the internet and the cooling, and there's all sorts of connections that have to be made. And a lot of those had to be done doing a spacewalk. So Peggy and I did a series of spacewalks to go out and hook everything up on the outside. Now, doing a spacewalk is just unbelievable. You get in this suit, which weighs about 300 pounds. What is that? About 140 kilograms. And once you lock the gloves on and the helmet on, and you seal yourself in, and you turn the batteries on and your oxygen on, you are your own little spacecraft for the next 8 hours. You now have a face full of Earth and space because now your helmet is filled with the beautiful Earth rolling below you. Doing a spacewalk is incredibly difficult physical work. Working against the suit is a lot of, it takes strength to do anything. One of the real pleasures of being on the space station in low Earth orbit is looking at our beautiful Earth below. And so I took about 14,000 photographs in my 4 months there. One photograph of a bittersweet moment in my mission, and that's the Space Shuttle Discovery. That's the crew that brought me to the space station, and this is them departing. So I'm on the space station. The rest of my crew is leaving and going home. I was very close to this crew, and so it was really sad to see them go. But of course, my time on the space station had started, and so that was exciting. So a bittersweet moment. You can see the space station here in the foreground, the beautiful Earth rolling below us, and Space Shuttle Discovery making its way home. Here's a picture out of my bedroom window. The solar array, of course, is our space station solar array. And the big body of water on the top there is the Gulf of Mexico that borders the southern coast of America. This is my hometown of Chicago. If you're familiar with the United States, there's a series of 5 Great Lakes in the middle. This is Lake Michigan. You can see there was a big snowstorm when I took this picture. Big snowstorms are a real hassle for everybody on the ground, but they're fantastic for us in space because the day after a snowstorm, we can really see cities and roads and lakes and rivers, which are not very easy to see without the snow covering. So the snow provides this high contrast background. So it's easier sort of to see things that we're interested in, like our neighborhood or our a small town that maybe you're looking for. Cities at night are fantastic. The city of Chicago uses a different color street light than any of its suburban neighbors. And so you can actually see the political boundary of Chicago because of the color of the streetlights. Almost everything that happens on Earth over those 4 months happens in space. And so, for instance, your hair grows and your fingernails grow, and you've got to cut your hair. And so we have a special hair clippers that is battery operated, and it's hooked up to this tube. The tube is hooked up to a vacuum cleaner, and you need that because as soon as the little pieces of hair are cut, you don't want them just floating around. You want them contained, so you have to suck them up into the vacuum cleaner. My little sleep quarters, it's about the size of a phone booth. Every astronaut gets their own little crew quarter, and you can close the door, have some privacy, and you can see my window so I can look out, and a computer so I can do my email and watch movies. And this is the old days where getting movies used to be with discs, and some trinkets from my kids. Here's a bag of water because all the water we drink has to be in bags. Otherwise, the water would float around and get into things. So you're going to ask, so we might as well talk about it. And that's the bathroom. And so I say that if you ever want to appreciate gravity in your life, think about it in the bathroom, because gravity is what separates you from your waste. And without gravity or without gravitational forces, everything just wants to hang around. And so obviously you don't want that. And so we have a bathroom. Actually, we have 2 now on the space station. But basically we use airflow to provide a force where gravity helps us on the ground. And this hose has a cap, and you take the cap off and you turn this valve. And not only does it open a valve, but it closes a switch, and it turns a fan on, and it pulls air through the hose. And that's what pulls the liquid waste away from the body. And then if you open this lid, there's a can with an opening, a pretty small opening, honestly, and that air gets pulled through that opening, and you put a bag, an insert in there, and that's what collects the solid waste. So after 4 months, it was time for me to come home. It's such an amazing vehicle. The space shuttle is such an amazing vehicle. You launch in Florida. It takes 8.5 minutes to attain 17,500 miles an hour, goes around the Earth about 5 million miles, and then you do a small burn over India, and it slows down enough to lower the orbit just enough to start running into the atmosphere, the molecules of the atmosphere. And then from then on, all you're doing is playing with hitting the atmosphere and using the atmosphere to slow down from that 17,500 miles an hour down to 300 miles an hour over the end of a runway in Florida, where you roll to a stop, and you're back 3 miles from where you launched. Amazing vehicle. I hope that I told you enough about my story to conjure up some good questions. And let me pull up my team's.
Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, the toilet one knocked out quite a few questions. So good to know. Also, I'd love to talk to you about baseball Sunday. I love baseball.
It's the best game around.
So, growing up, a lot of Toronto. So I'm assuming it's the White Sox or the Cubs. One of those two.
Well, so I'm a lifelong Cubs fan, dyed in the wool Cubs fan. Although because of some political reasons, I might change my allegiance. But basically, absolute Cubs fan.
Okay, so we've got one of the software developers, I think Nadir. Brace yourself for the questions. So I think Nadir's first.
My first question is, was there any physical, like in your body feeling, difference between being in the ISS and being under the ocean floor? Because I read your Wikipedia page and it says that you were on Nemo.
Right. So here's the interesting thing. You live, 40 years of your life or so with one gravity, and then you go to this thing where there's no gravitational forces. You're floating, and of course we're floating around the space station. But again, your stomach is floating inside your body, and the food is floating inside your stomach. What you would think is a completely alien environment. And honestly, you feel pretty crappy for the first day or two. And some people get sick, but I didn't get sick, but I did feel kind of crappy. And then on day 3 or so, you feel perfect. Everything, your body just feels absolutely like it's working exactly like it should. And so that's amazing. But then you come back to Earth, and you're messed up again. You would think, oh, I'm going to go back to the gravity field where I'm used to. But then you feel crappy again for a couple of days. Everything feels heavy. Now, you compare that with going down to 60 feet under water to Nemo, where we lived for 8 days. That's a different thing. So, of course, gravity is no different. The pressure is you're under higher air pressure there. You're under 3 atmospheres of air pressure. That doesn't really make you feel much different. The problem with living in an underwater habitat is everything is damp, and you feel it's just kind of gross. It's hard to get away from the humidity. So you're in this very humid, damp, and we scuba dive. We're scuba diving 6-7 hours a day down there. And so you're always wet, and you're always uncomfortable. And so lots of skin problems. And so it was a different kind of discomfort and actually in that case, the longer you went, the worse it got. You just felt worse and worse. Space, you feel pretty bad, but boy, you feel great after a couple of days.
Okay, that's great.
Great question.
So when you were on the ISS, were you aware of the crazy speed that you need to maintain, like 17,000 miles or whatever?
It's 28,000 kilometers or 17,000 miles. Yeah.
Were you aware of that?
Yes, of course. Well, so if you're driving and you're going 100 miles an hour on the road and stuff is flying by you, you feel that incredible sense of speed and danger. We're going many, many, many times that, but we're not near anything that's close to us. And so, so there's no sense of, you don't have this sense of incredible speed, like, holy cow, What you do is it's more intellectual speed, which is, we fly over the west coast of America, come over Los Angeles, for instance, and then 4 minutes later we're over Chicago, right? And then 2 minutes later we're over New York. And so, you think, holy cow, I just covered 2,500 miles in, whatever that is, 6 or 7 minutes. Or for Ireland, once we cross New York or Boston, we're in Ireland, 4 minutes later, 5 minutes later. And so that's intellectual speed. That doesn't feel like real speed because we're just not close to everything. Things are moving fast, but it's like being in an airplane looking down from when you're at altitude.
Yeah, my next question is, what is the instrument or tool that you are most proud of fixing or installing on the ISS, and why?
So one of the things one of our main objectives when I went there is there's an external cooling system where we route ammonia because the computers and people generate heat inside the space station. You got to get rid of it, and so we have heat exchangers that make the ammonia hot, and then we go out to radiators and we make it cool. And so when we added that module to the space station, we had to interrupt and extend the cooling lines. And once you stop the coolant from flowing, you cannot produce power. You must reject heat to produce power. So we had to turn off half the power on the space station to unhook these coolant lines and to hook the new ones in. And hooking up these coolant lines was really complicated. Big fixtures, and they're hard to do. So we knew that once we broke open the cooling line system, that unless we could make sure that it got back and rerouted, that half the power of the space station would be gone. If we broke it, it would be gone forever. And so we managed to install the new cooling lines to both systems, both halves. And so that's my proudest moment, is making sure that we routed those things so that so the space station could be fully operational.
We've just had a question put up, Dan, if that's okay, from one of our friends at Color
Sure.
Tokens Hitting. He's asked, what's the difference between weightlessness in a training plane, I think that's the Vomit Comet, and weightlessness in space?
Yeah, well, so right, you have an airplane that you can fly up, and then what you do is you basically fly the airplane down towards the Earth like that elevator that's falling, and so you in the airplane are floating. It's fantastically fun. It's really enjoyable. But of course, the ocean is coming at you pretty quickly, so you need to come out of that dive, and that's the really provocative thing. We call it provocative. That's a really nauseating thing about this flight, is that you're floating, and then all of a sudden you're pulling 2 times the acceleration of gravity. So you're floating, boom, now you're pressed against the floor. Now you're floating, pressed against the floor. That's what's really provocative to your balance system. That's what makes people throw up most of the time. And so this time, when you get up and you're floating, it's the same floating, but you're not then presented with this on-off of gravity, no gravity, gravity, no gravity. And so it also is provocative. Again, for most people, they feel unwell. Some people throw up going into space, but your body is magic, and it unbelievably gets used to it. And so I don't know, your brain's just amazing to all of a sudden decide that that's normal, and you feel great.
I think Ola, who's our head of development, I think she has some questions too. So Ola, would you like to jump in?
Hello, thank you for your presentation. It was great. I wanted to ask,
Sure.
What is the hardest thing to describe about space?
The hardest thing to describe about space. So it's funny because I spend most of my time now trying to describe what it's like to be in space. The feeling that I had looking at our beautiful Earth is, our Earth is stunningly beautiful. We have pictures of Mars. We've sent spacecraft to Mars. In fact, we've sent spacecraft past all of the solar system planets. So we have pictures of the planets, and they're beautiful and interesting. But boy, when it comes to sheer beauty, there's just nothing beats our Earth. We have incredibly blue oceans. We have snow-capped peaks. We have forests and rivers and spectacular. The outback of Australia is this incredibly red color, and so there's this aesthetic beauty of Earth. And so what that instilled in me is this real pride of my planet. I'm from there, and I feel like I am a citizen of this planet, and it really made me feel so proud to be an Earthling that I now believe that that's my number one citizenship. I believe that I am, above all, a citizen of this planet, And actually, another colleague of mine said it even more beautifully, which is, we all live on a spaceship. We live on a spaceship. We've got a crew of 7 billion people, and we just have to watch out for each other's crew member. We like on the space station, we entrust our lives, and they entrust ours to the other 6 or 7 people that are on the space station. Well, we need to think of this Earth as a space vehicle that has 7 billion people. So once you accept that and think these are our crewmates, and it made a shift in my head, which is, we're all crewmates here. We all need to make sure that we get through, and of course we have disagreements, and of course we don't always agree with each other, but we have got to recognize that we're on the same spaceship. And so that's kind of hard for me to explain that development in my head of boy, I wish I could bring everybody up to space to get this sense of we belong to this planet, and it's too easy to get caught up in belonging to this country or this team or this whatever, and forget that we're all crew members on this huge spaceship. So that's hard to explain, I think. But once I talk to other people that have been in space, they go, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about." And so that's the thing I try to convey and hope it gets through.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. And
Sure.
A follow-up question: Will commercial space flights be affordable in our lifetime?
In our lifetime, I hope so. I think using air travel is not a good equivalent, because if you think about air travel, we went from not being able to fly under a powered flight at all to shipping people around the country in a couple of decades, which is unbelievable. But I do believe that we'll put private citizens in space for tourism reasons, or for just for the experience. It's my hope that maybe in our lifetime, I guess it depends on where you and I are in our lifetimes, but hopefully in my children's lifetimes, you'll start saving, and you'll save for a couple of years and put your money away for that special thing, and that special thing will be taking a trip into low Earth orbit, and it's not going to be pocket change, but hopefully it's not out of the reach of most people to start saving and thinking about and making it a special event 10 or 15 years from now. So that's my hope. I would hope that many people get the opportunity to go into low Earth orbit.
I think we've got a friend at Scottish Enterprise, Tom Miller's asked a question as well.
Sure.
It might be difficult to answer, but looking at the future, you mentioned it currently takes between 6 to 9 months to reach Mars. Based on emerging propulsion technologies and looking perhaps at a 15-year horizon, how much could that come down by?
Well, every meter per second velocity you can add to the rocket as you're getting to Mars will reduce the time. The difficulty is, as you accelerate towards Mars, as you pick up your speed towards Mars, you're going to have to take out that speed to slow down to capture Mars. And so, you would hope that you could divide that into half with some sort of solar or nuclear powered technology. And so, if you can get that down to 3 months or so, then that's a lot more reasonable of a trip. One of the issues with going to Mars is we're in planetary motion, and so we are at a different distance from Mars all the time on a 26-month cycle. And so there's a moment every 26 months where the planets are the closest together, and that's what you're trying to target. That's the time that you're trying to get to Mars, to minimize the distance between Earth and Mars. And so even if you can get to Mars in a day, you're going to have to wait 26 months for the opportunity to come home. And so, a trip to Mars is, going to be a years-long mission, even if you could get to Mars instantaneously or, near instantaneously. Even if you can shorten the trip, just because of the way the planets move, you're going to have to wait over 2 years to come home. So that's part of the big undertaking of going to Mars, is figuring out how you deal with that amount of time, separated time.
Patrick also, he'd like to ask the question, is there stuff you saw in space you can't talk about?
So if it's the UFO kind of stuff, can't talk about it. No. So there's really no. So first of all, NASA is by law a civilian organization. It is separate from the military by law, and so in anything we do with the space station, and there was a time when we were flying military payloads on the space shuttle. We don't do that anymore. So by law, there's no military stuff, and so no, I'm sorry. I'm happy to tell you there are no secrets that we have from the space station, other than some maybe inside jokes and stories that we have between our crewmates that are embarrassing or otherwise good to have, hold in your back pocket when you need them to razz your crewmates. But no government state secrets.
We've got Scott Allen, one of our developers as well. Scott, you've got some questions?
So you've already mentioned that readjusting to gravity on Earth was quite difficult. But did you ever sort of smash any cups or plates thinking they would just float in place when you were back on Earth?
So we've all heard the stories of people coming back and letting go of things. And so I've got two quick stories. One, my first commander, Dom Gorey, before we were coming home, he was relating the story where his first night in bed at home, he woke up suddenly with his wife. He woke up flat on his face on the floor with his wife laughing hysterically at him because that first night he tried to float from bed to the bathroom, and the floating didn't work very well at home. And then the other thing is you hear these stories about people that just forget, and one of the first things they do when you come back from space is they want you are a medical specimen, and so they want a urine sample. So as soon as they can, they give you the cup and they get you to the bathroom, and so I've heard the stories of taking that cup and just letting it go, and so I had a death grip on that specimen cup, and I managed to put it on the top of the toilet and set it there, and I carefully let it go, but to me it was magic that it just sat there on the top of the toilet. It was just amazing. It was quite something to see. It's your brain just gets used to things floating, and so no, we've all heard those stories. One other quick story. I had on that first day, you think about everything you missed, and I was back then a big fan of Diet Coke, and so I asked for a Diet Coke, and big mistake, honestly. The carbonation was not good for me, but I had an empty can, and I was just waiting. I was seeing the doctors, and there was a waste bin, a couple feet away, and I was going to try to make the throw into the garbage can. Your brain completely forgets about, unlearns what a trajectory looks like in gravity, and so I tried to throw the can in the bin, and it basically fell straight to the floor. I gave it so little motion that it was hilarious that I gave it almost no horizontal motion, and it went just straight on the floor. It's really interesting that your brain, my brain stopped thinking about what a trajectory should look like and how much force that trajectory that I would have to impart. So I thought that was very interesting. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, those are the readaptation funny stories.
Thanks for that. I just have another quick one. I'm a big science fiction fan, and I just wondered if has science fiction informed any decisions in space? So, for example, are red shirts banned in space, or is there plans to grow millions of potatoes on Mars, like was featured in Martian?
I don't know. So, embarrassingly, I am not a science fiction fan, so I don't speak that language, and I'm sorry about that. But I assume that as we explore space, we need great ideas, and those ideas probably come from everywhere, including people that have committed their lives to think about what it's like to live away from Earth or away from other people, or those kind of things. And so, yeah, cultivation of crops and what's the if it takes, let's say it takes 9 months to go to Mars, what are you going to do in those 9 months? Does it make sense to put you to sleep like some movies have you, to put you in some sort of, low hibernation, so that you're not using a lot of oxygen and not using a lot of water? I mean, that's really interesting. So I assume that those architects for these big missions take influence from everybody, including the great science fiction thinkers and writers.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what you think of the James Webb Telescope, and are you excited for it?
Yeah, oh, very excited. Actually, I know not much about the telescope itself, but I know a little bit more about the spacecraft. And the really interesting thing, in my mind, the really interesting thing about this spacecraft is it's going to go live at L2, which is this gravitational hole or gravitational point that has equal gravity forces influence from the Earth and from the Moon. And so it doesn't orbit. It just sits in space being pulled by the Earth and the Moon and in this neutral point. Really, really interesting. And so, and it's far enough away from the Earth to, not be affected by its magnetic field and all these things. So from what I'm told from the science community, the amount of science that you'll be able to collect because of where you are will be fantastic. So I am excited about the James Webb Telescope.
Is that, sorry, just a follow-up question. Is that in middle Earth orbit? So it's like beyond where the space station is, but not quite.
Oh, yes. Yes. I think this L2, there's two L2s. I think this L2 is actually past the Moon, if I'm not mistaken. There are these neutral points created because of everything with mass pulls on, it creates gravity. And so there are these points where you are equally influenced by the two main bodies that you're near. And so I believe this point is actually beyond the Moon, on the other side of the Moon, but don't quote me on that. But it's certainly way above low Earth orbit.
My next question was, how much of the work that astronauts do is experimental, like lab experiments, versus engineering and that sort of field? Right.
So now we completed building the space station in 2011. When I was there, we were still building the space station. So when I was at the space station, 60% of my time was spent building and upgrading and building the space station basically, and then maybe 20% of my time was spent doing experiments. Now we are probably 60% doing experiments, and then the other 20, 30, 40, whatever, doing maintenance work, generally maintenance work, sometimes some upgrade work. And so we're at the point now where we are doing a ton of science, which is fantastic. I mean, that's why we built this thing. And so most crew members spent most of their time doing the science. And then, of course, you have to upgrade, you have to maintain and upgrade the vehicle as like anything, like your car or like your house. And so there's quite a bit of that stuff, but the majority of our time is spent doing the science. Yep.
What movie, TV series do you think depicted spaceflight and travel most accurately?
In terms of accuracy, Apollo 11 or Apollo 13 is still the gold standard for not only the technical aspect of it, but what I really learned to appreciate is the lives of the astronauts in Apollo 13 are the most accurate now that I've been on the astronaut side. The way they interact on the ground, the way their families get together, the social time that they spend together, the things they talk about, those are really accurate. I was really impressed with Apollo 13. Talked about the Martian before. When the Martian is the physics of the Martian are not good. But the mindset of the guy that's stranded on Mars is really resonates with me. About that's how the good astronauts that I know, I believe, would act like that or feel or would do those things. He's thinking things through. He's trying to figure out not only the next problem but the next worst problem. And so I those are two movies that I like. I like all space movies just because they're fun and but once you put the reality glasses on, it gets pretty narrow.
Yeah.
It gets pretty narrow.
How do you deal with the stress that what you have with you that's it? Like if you break your only spanner, you don't have a spanner.
Yeah. Right. You're just very conscientious of it, and you have to think about that all the time. And so I wouldn't call that stressful. It's more maintenance of your stuff. And it is easy to live on the space station and forget that you're surrounded by vacuum and that you don't want to punch a hole in the side or that you don't want to turn the wrong valve. And but you do know that, like when we do a spacewalk, there are dangerous parts, particularly dangerous parts of the spacewalk, and you just have to focus 100% during that time. When we're switching safety tethers, you're coming off one safety tether and getting on another safety tether. That's a really critical thing, and you just have to you recite the procedure in your head, and you watch your hands, and you just have to be 100% on the ball. And so, but yeah, knowing that you throw the wrong valve and you're going to dump half your water overboard, all those things, you just have to realize what's important and focus on the important things.
So we're taking a lot of your time. Just got another question from Tom. Can you think of any significant technologies developed for space exploration that you now see as commonplace in the commercial world and people might not realize its origins?
Well, there's a million. There's not a million, but there are things that have come from the early space days, integrated circuits and microcircuitry and that kind of thing.
Didn't Velcro come as well from space?
Velcro, sure, and food technology. But I would say that nowadays it's going the other way. There are commercial technologies that are being used in space. 3D printing is a great example of something that was developed for on the ground. And now the idea is, if we're going to send a spaceship to Mars, rather than fill up a whole locker full of spare parts, you bring a 3D printer and the right thread or the right material, and so and you just make the part that you need. What else? Now the space program uses software that's developed for ground purposes, scheduling and resource management, stuff like that. It used to be the other way around, right? It used to be that the space program was developing software now, and they would find uses for it. And so I'm sure there are some things that are like most research. There are probably some niche things deep in the heart of a rocket engine that requires incredibly tough, hard, whatever, resilient steel, and once that's developed, there's a particular alloy of aluminum that was developed, had to be very strong and had very specific thermal expansion parameters for these external tanks on the shuttle, and they had to develop an entirely new alloy, and of course now that alloy has commercial application because it's strong and it's fracture resistant, etc. So I am sure there are small examples in a niche area that have great commercial success. But nothing is easy to describe as Velcro or integrated circuitry.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for your time today. I think Scott's going to want to thank you and say goodbye, but can't thank you enough. This has been super. You're an astronaut who's a big baseball fan. You're the coolest man in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So thank you so much for your time today.
It's wonderful to meet you and your staff, and I look forward to getting up to Brodie Ferry again and seeing all my friends. Now I have more friends to go visit. So
you've got lots more friends at Brodie Ferry, Dan. Yes.
Thank you.
Anyway, listen, I appreciate your time. That is very kind of you today. It's been tremendous from our perspective to hear about you and to the boys to be able to speak to you. So
My pleasure. It's really my pleasure,
your
Scott.
time, but we'll just leave it like that, Dan, and we'll keep in touch. And let me know how we get your Keiko gets on as well, please.
I will absolutely do that. So thanks very much, and hopefully
Okay, thanks, Dan.
see you in
Thank
person
you.
next
Appreciate
time.
that.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye
you,
now.
Good night. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time.